This is a photo of the last army of the popes, the last papal army receiving a blessing from Pope Pius right before Rome and the papal states fell to a unified Italy. See, Italy in the 19th century was undergoing revolution and unification, right? The kingdom of Sardinia had started conquering all the other kingdoms, and eventually all that stood between it and full control of Italy was the papal states that had existed since the 8th century. And Pope Pius is a stubborn guy, right? He is determined that the tradition, the heritage, the legacy of the popes ruling in Rome and across the papal states must continue. And he's calling for volunteers, and he gets about 13,000 of them from across Europe, from France, Austria, the Netherlands, Spain, Catholics who feel as if this is like a mini crusade to defend the Pope. But however, in Rome itself, only about 200 people actually answer the call, because most people in Rome at the time actually want to be ruled by a unified Italy, and are kind of fed up of the Pope and his old-fashioned ways and his lack of change and reform. And in September of 1870, 50,000 Italians breach the Aurelian Walls, the famous walls built in the 3rd century, the walls of ancient Rome, and they march into the city, and they overpower and overwhelm the Pope's forces. The Pope declares himself a prisoner of the Vatican, right? And he basically refuses to leave and acknowledge that the king of Sardinia, now the king of Italy, Victor Emmanuel, is the official king of Italy. He refuses to acknowledge him. I think he actually excommunicates the poor guy. But eventually, a few decades later, the popes negotiate with Italy a deal whereby the Vatican becomes its own city and its own state. And that's how we get the Vatican today. But I think this picture is fascinating because for centuries the popes wielded great power. I mean, they were never more powerful than the princes and kings of Europe, really. And they were always at their whim, right? But, the popes throughout much of the Middle Ages were pretty powerful and had a lot of influence. And this photo sort of captures that last moment of great influence of the popes, able to raise an army to defend themselves and Rome. I think it's a great photo, and I hope you enjoyed.